I think great introductions. What we see, probably I'll just try to summarize the way in which we want to take the panel discussion ahead. We'll start with a concept which typically is something which has to be an eye-opener for everyone. We talk about productivity being increased through a lot of ways in which Gen AI is now transforming things. But I would want to bring to notice that there is always a productivity paradox, so to speak. What does that mean? It means that anything and everything that you would want to bring in with a new technology in place, obviously if you try spending more time on it, the productivity is going to go down rather than going up. So probably Gen AI or agentic AI or the way in which bots are coming out, we may want to look at it in a very different way, which means if I have to get this analogy rightly fit with the Gen AIs of the world, probably it means that we may have to unlearn and then learn it all over again, because the use cases are going to define the way in which the Gen AI has to move forward. We never knew that agentic AI would become so powerful when Gen AI came into picture, and now you can actually connect a lot of systems with those contextual discussions through Gen AI. So that is how I thought I will just set the context for this discussion, and just to ask those typical questions wherein we see a lot of people now adopting Gen AI to that extent. This is to Arockia. Probably if you can also help us understand how are the enablers helping you in trying to develop these Gen AI practices, and what are the blockers, so to speak, when it comes to enterprise readiness for Gen AI?
I think this is a question I think almost everyone would be breaking their heads for last 2 to 3 years, I guess, almost in every industry. So I'll just share what I learned along the journey. So for me, everything starts with us. So it all starts with us, right? So it's upon us how we interact and engage with our environment. It decides how we are going to use a specific technology. It's not only for Gen AI, it's going to be applicable for anything which is going to come into the market. So from an enabler perspective, maybe I'll start with a small, it won't be a story, but let's say when computers were introduced, when the age of computers, we moved from book and pen to a computer age. So that was a transition. And cost of operation, of course, was higher. So the cost of operation when computers came into picture became new normal when compared with when you had only book and pen, which is a lower cost. So that was the discussion, and eventually it had its own advantages, pros and cons as well. And eventually we moved upon, and now I would relate current scenario to something similar. So where we want to adopt Gen AI, agentic AI, or whatever word you call it, when you want to, you will definitely see an increased operational cost, and that will be the new normal in future. But personally, I would say don't look at an cost perspective, but personally, what I see is instead of cost of operation, I see it as cost of decision making. So this is going to be the new metric in future, how decision making is going to get impacted if you don't evolve. So for this reason, getting our buy-in from your, let's say the executive leadership of the company is going to be very specific, because without the sponsorship, you cannot move ahead. So that is going to be an enabler for sure. This is just one, though there are many. And from a blocker perspective, I feel when we don't have a proper governance around how to use a technology, it will always falter and fail. So this is not the only one, but there are many. But I feel this is one of the primary thing which has to be thought about before implementing AI.
I think that's great. I would want to pass on the mic to Shashwat and probably take his views, because considering that the regulations on the bank side are too stringent to that extent, how are you managing those and making it enabled for the entire enterprise? Also, I presume there must be a lot of blockers which are, so to speak, workarounds that you must be identifying. So your views, please.
I would second what Sir said. So one, I think enablers are when you have buy-ins, when the top management has okay investing, and they're interested in investing in the projects that we are trying to drive, because this GenAI is costly. It requires funds post POC. Otherwise, it will just remain, in the POC stage. The biggest enablers are when you have robust infrastructure. I mean, when you have platform to experiment. So having GPUs, having cloud accessibility. In banking environment, it generally takes a lot of time, because all of us would have encountered at some stage IT security coming in saying, "Nahi, ye nahi ho sakta, this is not possible, this will not work, this will not work." But I think convincing and partnering with them to find a solution can become enabler. So partnering, having a buy-in, and buying from all the stakeholders with business alignment becomes an enabler. Blockers are, I think, one is definitely that it is chaotic at this point. If you ask particularly to generative AI, I am a firm believer that this has immense potential and it will really help us in future. But right now, looking at the state, the outcomes that we are getting is non-repeatable. So somewhere, can we have the lineage to cross-check what we have got as an outcome? That we would need some more precedences to put it into production, especially on the risk side. But on the marketing side and sales side, we do see a lot of adoption happening.
Sure, thanks. I think that helps. To Anirudh, we understand that when it comes to GenAI use cases, probably there is a huge cost behind it. Other than cost, how are you at the org level trying to justify the ROI, and how are you utilizing those use cases to that extent?
See, hello. So you rightly mentioned that this GenAI is a costly, means it's an investment and it's not a one time. It has to be consistent, and it's a process. Every organization has to walk onto it. So what GenAI, see, many of them will, there is a lot of debates or podcasts happening, will GenAI take their jobs out? I'm not, you can say, touching base that topic in itself. Cost optimization is just one of the parts. It is something, this can bring definitely a different cultural, you can say, paradigm shift in the entire organizations. This AI and when the entire organizations at a smaller employee RM level also start thinking or explaining something to the customers in a much more scientific way, there where actually it brings a different culture, how you talk to your customers. See, we being from a real estate, we might be selling one of the costliest product to our customers. Even if I take Mumbai, 1 BHK is 1 CR minimum, things are there. So the way you talk to the customers, that brings an entirely different change. Not only these things, the tats, the many, you can say, see this way the same people, what we are doing the stuffs, monotonous stuffs, we're taking up a 7 to 8 hours stat. With the help of GenAI or this AI, are we, you can say, impacting their day-to-day life? Are they able to do the same work, or you can say much better work in a smaller time? So reducing the cost is some other thing. The other use cases opens up very fast, which was not even thought about ki ho sakta hai, or you can say it used to take a while to earlier the traditional way of training the models and implementing. It used to be a journey of one year down the line, and then some results used to expect. This has actually changed how the use cases that we all the you can say organizations are sitting with a huge amount of data. How that data can be encached or how it can be used, that different use cases has opened up because of this GenAI. So this is what I can say, ki don't see this ROI of cost, how many people have been reduced because of this thing. No, there are many other parameters how you can judge the success of GenAI implementation in your organization.
Yeah, I think thanks. We see Indranil also joining us. Good to have you on the panel. If you can spare like 2 minutes to introduce yourself and probably what are your thoughts on the way in which Gen AI is moving and how do you see it transform the way the businesses are being done at this point in time?
Hey, hi everyone. My name is Indranil. I am a data architect at Upstox. So from my opinion, right, so how things are moving, right, I think if you don't innovate and try to onboard Gen AI into your processes, I think it's more or less likely to reach a stage where you're kind of will always be lagging behind your competitors. I think this we saw when we were going through the digital transformation as well. During the entire digital revolution, right, whichever firms, they were not ready or not quick to adopt that and not ready to move quickly, I think they kind of lagged behind. I think that's prima facie the learning that we have had. I think if you don't move along with it, you are going to reach a stage where there's going to be some new competitor who is going to come in and do a better job than you by using the transformation that Gen AI is bringing, basically.
Sure, great, thanks. Moving on to Atul, we talked about cost as one of the parameters. Are there any other metrics that you are trying to define which is then enabling people to understand that yes, Gen AI is there and it is changing the lives of people, customers, organizations, so to speak, and making it more worthwhile for people to adopt it to that extent?
Yeah. So at least in our company, right, because we have productionalized one use case of conversational AI, right? So I'll be more specific and give the metrics which we are measuring. So it's first of all, even before going in and defining metrics, right, we need to ensure that the expectations are straight, they are practical. We are not using the hype metrics, and we are using the ground metrics to actually measure the success of adoption of our agentic AI, right? So cost will eventually go down, right? Once we start optimizing, once we start working efficiently, cost will eventually go down. But to even start with the adoption of a wider digital transformation like agentic AI or bringing in any AI platform, right? It first requires trust. It first requires trust from your day-to-day people. Like, do my data analysts believe that the output which is coming from this tool is trustworthy? Can I blindly trust it? And can I give my insights to the business owners? Actually, the business owners are the real end users of this platform. So my business users should also trust this data, right? So how many times I have to keep iterating on my prompts to get the right result? So that is also very important. It's not just the time taken to the insight, but how many times I'm iterating on the same question, because then it leads to frustration that, okay, I'm just asking questions, I'm trying to manipulate the prompts, but it is not working.
Yeah, probably the productivity paradox
exactly,
kicks in. Yeah.
Exactly. The second important parameter which we generally look at is, if let's say a prompt is not working, even after multiple iterations, right? Am I able to give the input back to the platform? Is there a thumbs up or a thumbs down kind of a reinforcement option? If it is there, are my data engineers and data scientists, what are the approaches they are taking? Is it only the instruction manipulation, just go to the global instruction set, manipulate it or mature it? Do I have to build a RAG system out of it? Do I have to do fine tuning? So what is the time taken to actually correct the entire process? That is also another metric which we should look at. These are all practical things or nuances which are there in front of us when we are adopting any such big initiatives like generative AI. So cost, time taken, that is something which will come later. But these are the practical metrics which everyone should evaluate, and then look out for how much time to insights, has it reduced or not? What is the cost which is reduced or not?
Perfect. I think that's great.
Can I add a little bit?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So on the cost and ROI front for generative AI projects, generally, that's my humble opinion that this is in a very startup kind of era, and we should think like VCs. That we will have to take a longer term view on the benefits and ROIs. It will definitely generate ROI. May not be the payback period that we are looking at, but eventually it will. So have that view.
Yeah, I think great. Arun, how are things being taken up when it comes to the sports as one of the industry, so to speak? And are there any exciting use cases that you have cracked in your organization which are led by Gen AI to that extent?
Absolutely. I think just before getting into Gen AI, right, I also wanted to just give a feel around where artificial intelligence means artificial intelligence is something not new, right? Even at the beginning of millennia, artificial intelligence existed, right? It existed in different forms. Like, for example, at that point of time, the motivation was nature, metallurgy, physics, simulated annealing, genetic algorithms have existed even at those points of time, right? What they used to do was maybe possibly look at heuristic-based search, right, which is very different than what the genetic algorithms do today. Right. So at that point of time, the whole motivation and the genesis of AI was more around, can I get more search-based and then adapt into those search-based mechanisms, right? But then machine learning came in, which is also a subset of artificial intelligence. And then you started looking at reasoning and aspects of pattern recognition and other aspects, right? Neural nets with the GPU expansions, neural nets again came back into the fore. And neural nets also gave you that space wherein you started expanding a lot more into machines becoming more and more intelligent. The generative aspects of them is something new, wherein machines have moved from not just purely learning and pattern recognition to actually generating, right? Understanding and generating. Now, understanding and generating by itself is great, where you can build it very specifically. As we all know today, the large language models, the large multimodal models which are going to come through. The next level, for example, Llama 4 is going to, Llama, which is the Meta AI, is going to come up with the Llama 4. It's an open source. And Llama 4, they're going to come up with your multimodals as well as omnimodal models, which means sensor-based data can be merged with text-based data, image-based data, videos, audios, along with sensor-based and other applications, right? So it's expanding in directions where we are not only looking at agentic. Agentic is more autonomous decision-making, right? But even before that, a lot of these integrations of human and AI is happening together. Because the point is not just an internal productivity gain that you want to build, you also want to build an external creation mindset, right? Now in Dream Sports and Dream 11, for us, that essence is more important than the internal productivity at this point of time. While we have invested in internal productivity use cases like first response automation within customer care, for a sports fan, there's nothing more better than building an LLM which actually looks at having a companion like a sports analyst, right? Giving you that, rather than just giving you database of information, stats and all those, an abstraction layer of an AI which actually tells you which players, which type of teams will help you out. How can you simulate that in your leagues? So we have built something called as an AI coach, which becomes like that sports analyst for the user to have that that kick and that engaging experience that they want, the personalization, the personal feel that the user wants to have. Now, from an exciting aspect perspective, we have also invested in something more external. So we have built out a product which is, some of you would have seen out, it's just come out during Champions Trophy. It's a product called Crick. Crick is essentially an LLM-based, a stats LLM-based product that we have built out. We have built it out on Llama, using Llama, and it's essentially builds out at any event of gameplay, right? Be it, for example, in a particular over or a particular innings, what can happen, the odds ratio around that. So essentially a user can prompt out anything that they want to know about what can happen in the prediction that can happen in that particular match. And you can have odds ratios created based on whatever has been generated using the LLM, right? So that's something exciting. We are also going into external creations because we believe external creations is something which will define applications, right? While we are not investing, India by itself is not investing in foundational LLMs, it will come, but application-based LLMs becomes very key. And for that, it's not only about internal-facing productivity, but also external-facing creations that becomes extremely important. So we are investing heavily on that. With the guardrail, that governance is going to be extremely key. In this journey of the transition to an digital world, right, and an AI-driven world, you don't want to lose out that essence of human intelligence, right? Human intelligence cannot decay. Human intelligence should complement what the machine is building out. Only then you will be able to build world-class products which will redefine the future. That's how we are thinking about it.
Yeah, I think exciting times for people in the future when it comes to sports. Obviously, LLM is going to change a lot of things for us. Moving to Shashi, how do you think probably the governance angle is also playing its way in defining Gen AI to that extent? And if there are any exciting use cases which are there to probably help you and others also understand that governance, yes, is a key, while innovation is going to take its own toll. And I see that innovation is moving faster than the governance. Obviously, that is the other way around. Probably it should happen. But your thoughts on that, please. Yeah.
So innovation always moves ahead of any governance. So fortunately, in AI, there are governance around it across countries. Even in India, we have governance. Indeed, recently, a month back, we have a proposal for comments from the industry. First, define what is governance. What exactly? What will we miss if there is no governance? So fundamentally, there is no moral part in a model building. So these are all ultimately neural networks. They're machines. They're as good as whoever is training them. If I am a person who is biased, like in a banking industry, in a particular segment, if there is any particular community where the loans are going bad, so the model trains itself as this community don't lend money. So that's how the model trends. However, as an industry, as a responsible lender, you want to give a fair chance to everybody. So that bias of the model creates, somebody has to oversee and somebody has to eliminate. Otherwise, models always comes with bias. That's how they perform. So that's one. And second thing is, any decision is made by the model. So who is responsible? Is the model responsible? Is the person who is building that model responsible? Or ultimately the business head or the CEO responsible? So the definition of ownership has to be defined. That's the other part. And then within that, so what is the ownership of the person who is building that? So the data science head cannot come back and say that, okay, this is a ML model, this is unsupervised learning, so I can only explain the output, I cannot explain what has come in, especially for important things. So regulator, especially the financial regulator, RBI, has given clear guidelines effective from January this year, where all the models, all the rule engines that are built in financial services industry has to be explainable. So whatever you do, ultimately you can build an unsupervised model, but ultimately you have to figure out ways to convert into an explainable model. In the absence of it, that will become a showstopper, at least in places where there are high stakes involved. One can always keep experimenting. Indeed, perhaps China is the only regulator in the world to allow unsupervised models, that too after 5 years of monitoring. So most of the countries don't have unsupervised models allowed in financial industry. But China has allowed it a year back, but they have monitored it for 5 years.
I think explainability is the word in which regulation also can probably help people understand this is how the model is going to work.
And then comes ultimately the moral part of it. So whose morals is it? Who decides the moral part of the entire governance? So there is no black and white answer. So what is moral in one country may not be necessary, in one part of the country is not necessary, or one particular person, right?
Probably just one example on that, which I was reading, is how do you actually gauge and how do you measure different efficacies of the models that are now coming up in the market? You see Llama has grown, you see DeepSeek has come up, OpenAI is churning out with newer and newer versions as we speak. Every single day there is a news that hits the market saying that this is a more efficient model. And when we try to have independent bodies who are then trying to understand whether the models that are being coming into the market, are they comparable, are they giving the results the way in which we want, probably governance becomes a guardrail and we need independent entities. I heard that probably these independent organizations are also being funded by one or the other of LLM providers to that extent. But yeah, that's a great thought to that point. A question to Indranil. Do you think you are having an internal resistance when it comes to transformations that have to come up? And I am pretty sure that this must be a question in everybody's mind. And you see a lot of internal resistance when you are the champion of innovation to that extent. What are your thoughts on that? Yeah.
I think that more or less goes with our job titles, that we do have to face a lot of resistance in whenever. So what I've seen is whenever you're trying to bring about a change, right? That's a human nature. People generally would like to give some kind of resistance. We know none of us want to change the things or change the way how we work, right? And that's where what you have to do is bring along people and give them a seat on the table and make them part of the process. What you also have to understand that we talk a lot about trust building, right? But trust is a very abstract thing, right? You don't just wake up one day and start trusting someone. It's something that you build over time and something that happens very organically. So the fact that if some organization is trying to onboard a Gen AI based solution, I don't think the trust is ever going to come unless and until you start showing results where the trust starts building, right? So one thing is, giving people a seat on the table, making them part of the process, making them involved in the decision making. So things like, what kind of a strategy are you choosing as an organization, right? If let's say you're trying to automate things on the customer service side, if your customer service team is on board and part of the strategy building process, I think by design, they get a buy-in into that. You can design things in a way where they are part of the new system that you're putting in place. So let's say, in a traditional organization, a customer service team would typically sit on the other side of the call center, or let's say the other side of a chatbot, and try to answer whatever the user is asking, right? But what happens if a Gen AI-based product comes in, right? So now their responsibility moves more towards, finding out issues or finding out errors where the chatbot is really not doing well. And you basically use them as a human in the loop, trying to improve the process as a whole, so that over a period of time, you can keep on improving, right? So let's say if you have a strategy around building a application instead of building a foundational model, I think there are so many things that can go wrong because there are only so many things that you have under your control. So that is where having someone in the human in the loop system would be extremely important. They should also understand, okay, what are the scenarios under which your chatbot would default to an agent handover mode versus what are the scenarios under which your chatbot would answer automatically. When there is a transition happening to an agent handover mode, are your agents getting to see what all things the chatbot already answered in that particular thread? Are they getting the context? Because only then they will come back to us and give us that feedback, okay, we have seen this kind of patterns or this kind of questions where the chatbot does not perform well and it leads to a transition, right? What I've also seen, another aspect is, I think we touched upon the explainability part, right? What we have seen is, I think there are three key aspects. One is having a really strong evals framework, having a really strong observability platform, and having a really strong explainability platform. So evals is basically before you even deploy that part into into production, what are the checks and balances, or how are you measuring how good or bad the solution that you're putting in place? Observability is once you have put it in production, are you monitoring how is it performing? What percentage of requests are being solved basis the data that is, let's say, retrieved from a news database, or or what are the percentage of questions that you're answering based on the data that is retrieved from the FAQ database. So those kind of observability and good analytics you have to build so that you know how it is performing. And then of course the explainability part that comes under it, that okay, if something has gone wrong, how do you explain why it has gone wrong, right? So typically we divide it into retrieval versus generation problem. So whenever we are debugging something, the first thing we try to attribute that is whether this is a retrieval problem or a generation problem, because that kind of simplifies things a lot. If you know something is a retrieval problem, you know you have to do something on the retrieval leg versus something on the LLM models.
Probably that summarizes it all. But just a follow-up question to Arockia. How do you think the transparency problem can be tied with ethics? Because obviously we discussed that foundational LLMs are not the ones that we are owning at this point in time. We are depending upon a black box model in the backend, which is then giving you that output, which you are also trusting to that extent. If ethics are being compromised on that side of things, probably we may not even know whether it is compromised or not, because ultimately you have been seeing that model would obviously have a lot of outliers, so to speak. And these outliers are because the data of those outliers was not significant enough to make its way into the model's core practices. And hence probably ethics becomes one of the most important things. Any thoughts wherein how are you balancing it at your end in the organization?
So, okay, so for me, for a transparency and ethics perspective, let me start with why you want to use, or the purpose of using a particular technology or a solution that's going to be important. And I just have one point when it comes to, let's say, drive this from an ethics perspective. Having right people at the right role will always help you. We might ignore this. In most organizations, you might have noticed as well. It's a common problem. Even I have noticed when we don't have the right people in the right role, we'll always have an issue in driving, let's say, an adoption of a technology from an ethical standpoint. So that, and especially when it comes to AI, we also need to know, because most of us, if you see the current market trend is everyone wants to become an AI engineer or a data scientist. So that is how it has been promoted or marketed. But there is another part, there is another side of this same concept, how to use AI. No one thinks about it, and it has to be also thought through. So even not only building it, but you should also know how to use it, and how not to also use it, and when to use it especially. So this will by default give you that thought, or this, when we have this thought process, eventually you will bring in this ethics concept when you start building your solutions as well.
Sure. I think that's a great thought to start the day as well. Yeah, ethics being one of the key pillars in any of the businesses that we do. Arun, how do you think the POCs that everyone is doing at this point in time, how are these POCs fast enough to see the light of the day in a production system? Obviously, we understand there are a lot of regulations, there are a lot of ways in which we ourselves are also creating those regulations and not going all guns blazing to push a GenAI use case into production. How are you doing it at your end?
So, as I previously mentioned, right, Aditya, I think the key essence for GenAI today is there's a lot of discovery happening, right? And it's happening at a pace. For example, the amount of choices which are coming resulting from GenAI solutions is more like a Moore's law, right? Maybe Moore's law is falling short in terms of the proliferations which are happening through, right? What is most important is what matters. End of the day, it has to be value backwards. It has to be a user backward need which needs to be solved using a GenAI problem, right? GenAI can be applied into different scenarios, but as you rightly said, can it be scalable enough? Can the pilot be scalable enough to bring it into business operations is an absolutely altogether different question, right? So the part where we are investing very, very closely to understand this is, what is that's going to bring to the user differently, right? And in our business, given sports tech and that element of responsible gaming, the user not getting addicted into that particular feature, the essence, the game that you provide, right? It's also important to build that guardrail in terms of how do you look at addictions? How do you look at the decay in human intelligence? How do you look at biases actually resulting into decisions which are very suboptimal and which can shape behaviors very differently for our users, right? So those become very important considerations for us, even when we look at even where to invest from a prototype perspective as well as from scaling perspective, right? So having the infrastructure and building it out from that scale perspective is an afterthought while we look at it, absolutely. But the more important thought that actually drives the build of that particular solution is a value backward and a user backward need, which truly can be transformed by that seamless integration between AI and the human interface, right? So for example, today, if you look at the medical industry, right, the very fact that human and AI interfaces can be built in, you can discover compounds that much more faster, right? And in that, you would definitely want to go all guns out, double down, triple down in terms of POCs and other things you build out, right? Because that's something which is going to change human needs, and that's something that's going to build in newer solutions and make lives better, right? So that very thought around, will it make lives better? Will the user really not get addicted into that setup? How can it change the paradigm of what you offer, right? In terms of, those become important considerations as we look at scaling up our POCs.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Just one, if I understand the time would be of essence here. If I have to then wrap up the discussion to that extent, which are the key two phrases or two words that you all think defines GenAI in the way in which you are envisaging it for your organizations, and obviously for all the people who are sitting out here. And if you want to give out that message to everyone, probably those quick 2 words or 2 phrases that help you understand it better. Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah.
So I personally believe it is something as fundamental as what it been taught as electricity. So it's up to us, our imagination, what exactly you are going to build as use cases. One can just touch it and die of a shock also. So it's up to the imagination of the individual leaders and the larger organization ecosystem. Usually what happens in institutions is the decision makers are not well onboarded on the possibilities and imagination. Usually we always catch up when somebody else is doing it, we'll also want to be part of it. We don't want to, we only realize our native problems and native solutions as long as we're able to get the conceptual part of that utility right, and we are able to apply to our individual organization, then the application output is going to be exponentially different. It's not just one data science head or a CIO decision, it's a decision of a few people who are key leaders driving the organization.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to summarize it. Obviously, it cannot be centralized to that extent till the time it gets democratized and the value is being given to the users. Obviously, we as innovators are the ones who would be pushing it, but ultimately the value has to be seen by the users. Yeah, Indranil, sorry, you.
Okay,
yeah,
so
please, Shashwat. Yeah, please.
Two words from my side is experiment and fail fast. Especially on GenAI. And the second one is keep the humans in loop. I can give one example between ChatGPT and DeepSeek. These were only humans which made a difference.
Perfect, thanks. Yeah, Indranil.
I think from my side, it would be customer delight and profitability. I think from how I have seen the industry going forward, I think the difference maker is going to be how much of a delight you can bring your customer through that experience that you're creating. Because I think pretty much every firm, every competitor is going to do something with GenAI. It's about how you build that product as a whole that makes a difference and makes a difference to the life of your user. And second point is how that in turn drives your revenue. So I think there have been quite some good use cases at Upstox that we have been very lucky to build, where we have kind of combined both of this aspect, which has led to our increase in the NPS score as well, and which has also led to a profitability factor, trying to bring in more revenue through the experiences that we are creating. So, yeah.
Great, thank you. Atul. Sorry. Yeah, please go ahead.
If I have to really summarize, as you mentioned, customer delight. So everything means customer is the focus. And the second is the employees. So the people of our organization. So if we are able to change, or you can say bring a delta in both the things, one is the customer experience and the productivity of our employees, then this entire Gen AI or AI will make sense. And bring you can say, a business sense to this entire implementation sound to it. If it is not impacting this too, at least from a person from my side, if it is not impacting these two stakeholders, then it is just another gimmicks of the tech implementation. So definitely before implementation, if this two use cases either are taken care or set the expectations or the goals, then everyone will see an ROI on this implementation round to it. So this is the two aspects.
Great, yeah.
So for me, I feel that building trust is the most important factor, because the single thing which will allow people to start using Gen AI applications is trust. If you are able to show them that this is the output and this is the confidence score also. So it's not just the output, but we need to also tell him how this output has been derived. So the transparency of how that output has derived, that is also important. So building trust is something which everyone should start looking at right from the design phase, right from the strategy phase, when we are moving towards agentic AI or building or bringing in some conversational AI or Gen AI use case in others. So that's one. Second is adoption will require trust, but it will also require strategy in terms of your data, because your generative AI application will be only as good as the underlying data. So this is something which a lot of people undermine. They just see that there is some LLM which will create some magic. It's not like that. So you need to be prepared that there are some prerequisites before you even start this. Most of the Gen AI applications or the strategies fail because the data strategy itself is not there in place. So these are the two main things to at least get immediate results or see near future results. Not more or broad-based hype words, but realistic expectations, which I can get in next 6 months.
Yeah, precisely.
So like I said earlier, mindset change is one or maybe a couple of words I would like to remind everyone. So move away from cost of operation mindset to cost of decision making. So when I said cost of decision making, it's not purely the little cost, but what will you lose if you don't do this? So in that aspect, it's going to help a lot. Another word, just like a couple of days back, we were in a debate, especially around artificial general intelligence, AGI. Today, if you ask me, I don't know whether this is going to be a reality in the coming years or not. I have no clue. But what I would request is, consider this word AGI in your mind in everything you start with technology, and then start working towards it. Because there is a possibility. So always keep this in mind, and then start working towards your governance.
Great. Arun, any last thoughts?
Yeah, I think we are in the middle of a revolution. There's no two thoughts about it, right? We've seen internet, we've seen mobile, we've seen cloud. If it was not for the mobile revolution, you would have not got companies like Ubers of the world and things like those. So the genesis of the next gen tech, which is going to make human lives better, which is going to connect people, has to come through. So AI is going to create that for sure, right? But with that guardrail, as we all have been speaking about, that element around getting the user along, keeping that human intelligence as part of that entire journey with the AI, right? Making sure that the thin lines between fake, fraud, and other elements are taken care of. Security, feeling people secured, their data secured, PII is not restricting into contact information, right? PII is expanding beyond into human intent, into human thoughts. These have to be taken care of. Only if that's taken care of, that this AI together will create the next generation of solutions which are absolutely unknowns of today, right? And absolutely, as AGI we mentioned about, yeah, today AIs are specifically looking at depths. LLMs are looking at specific domains, right? AGI is essentially thinking about how humans operate. You can do mental switchovers between one topic to other. AGI is essentially that breadth, right? So that's going to come. For sure, it's going to come over a period of time, right? But in that journey, how do you take humans along, and how do you make it very meaningful in terms of not decaying that human intelligence becomes extremely important.
Yeah, I think wonderful thoughts out here. Would want to wrap up the session, and I think Shashi mentioned the right point out there, wherein are we in the hype cycle at this point in time? Probably yes, we are at that hype cycle, wherein we are hoping that we reach the plateau of productivity, which is the way in which GenAI will help everyone and every single organization, customer to that extent. And hope that the thoughts that have been put forth by the leaders out here have probably given that extra edge to everyone out here. And probably we all should go back with those examples with us and try to implement it in our organizations to a greater extent that we see a lot of productivity out here. But thank you all. I want to wrap this session up.